you're seeing every time you shoot at the target, you hear the fire command. Is that what you're seeing? Or are you seeing that? Are you mentally visualizing that as your threat? Are you mentally visualizing that as your threat?
That's a sad video.
What about this situation? What if that's what you roll up and that's the threat you have to address? Threat not to you, it's a 12-year-old kid. This happened up in Independence, Missouri about 3 years ago. 12-year-old kid on TikTok with a gun to his head, while a 13-year-old put the gun to his head to film it for his buddies. What if that was the decision that you had to make? Have you encountered that and mentally prepared yourself for that in your head to where, God forbid, you ever have to be that officer that has to present that? Are you prepared for it?
Like
Have
the
you
boy
actually
wants
seen
to
that?
be filmed like that, or he doesn't?
He does not want to be
okay.
filmed. He is not willing at all in this situation. Oh yeah, he is
Like a-
not
Well,
willing
people
for
do
this.
people do dumb stuff on TikTok.
Yeah,
I didn't.
no. Little Timmy here does not want to be in this situation right now.
Little Timmy.
Or have you mentally prepared yourself for that, like I saw that night? Have you prepared yourself for the muzzle flash, the knife, the gun, these sort of things? And then when you have the scenario where they say don't shoot, are you mentally envisioning that you're challenging them? Because when we do the shoot, no shoot scenarios on the range, are you mentally challenging, or are you challenging, not being mentally challenged, but are you challenging them and mentally seeing them comply with that command and then drop that? We're gaming ourselves, preparing ourselves for the circumstances of those situations. If you're not prepared, it kind of sucks. The look on her face is absolute gold.
No.
I'm not saying prepare for a seagull in the face while you're on an amusement park ride, but do you think she ever considered she was going to end up getting a facial from a seagull? I didn't think so. So, mental preparation, guys. So, going back to everything in hand, I think you've heard some of the factors that played into this. If I just used that damn Mustang as cover, if I used that Mustang as cover, do you think I would have been probably in a better position? God forbid he was able to continue to fire and he wasn't shooting some cheap piece of shit high point. Yeah, absolutely. Would it have put me in a better position at advantage, knowing that I'm already at some level of a disadvantage? Absolutely. So, at this point, shots have been fired. I'm on the radio screaming, sounding like a little girl. And I remember I moved laterally, because now cover's really important, right? I move laterally and I get behind that little Ford Focus back there, get down on the knee and I change mags. And I remember being shocked to find that my magazine was completely empty. I thought my magazine had malfunctioned. Not realizing, because the only thing I remember was my last 6 rounds, where mentally I told myself, I'm just going to start burying rounds into the door jamb of the house. That's where you see that big stripe of rounds along the side of the house, is me shooting laterally and putting them into the side of the house, thinking, you stay there. I don't want you getting back out before I can get behind cover. That's the only rounds that I remember firing. Your mind will blip out in these circumstances. Why does it blip out? Because it's going to go and revert to the things that you've done, what you practiced, what you trained on, and that's what your brain is going to revert to. Oh, I'm getting shot at, probably should shoot back, and your brain's going to revert to that. Anyways, I move behind the Ford Focus. Officer Marlin grabs his shotgun, checks himself out. Once he relieves me and covers up on the Focus, I go back and grab my patrol rifle. This is more something probably reserved for medical tactics, but this is a good thing to understand. We all like to wear the black or the dark gloves because they look good. They don't show blood at night. If you're wearing black gloves or anything like that during an incident like that where you need to check yourself out, wipe down your arms, but take those gloves off or put on some kind of brighter gloves that are going to be able to show blood. The black will not show at night. But wipe down your arms, wipe down your legs, check yourself, make sure that you're not bleeding, continue to check your hands. Your adrenaline's going to be dumping at that point. You're having a sympathetic nervous system reaction. Your body's in fight or flight. You're not necessarily going to feel that pain or notice that you're shot. Some officers, it takes several minutes for them to even notice that they were shot, stabbed. My FTO at Springfield, I think he said it took him 10 minutes to realize he had a 380 in his arm. And Mark is pointing something out. This is no bullshit. I remember I slung my patrol rifle, racked around in the chamber, and I went to take a step back, and I stopped, and I literally went like this. And I checked my crotch. Don't overlook certain things, guys. Wipe your head, check every single area, make sure that you're not hit on there. That is for confidence, and that slows you down, that breaks your tunnel vision. If it's safe to do so, do those sort of things to make sure you're okay. So I came back up, posted up on the front corner of this F-250 while he remained inside basically barricaded down in the basement of there and negotiated with him for next 19 minutes until I think Hughes, you were the one that got there and relieved me on that position. And then was it you?
You and I went to the other side of the house.
Yeah, I came up to the west side of the house at one point, and then I ended up going up to the north side. So, and then you guys got there not long after that.
I made
so.
it from Ozark to there in 12 minutes.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you gotta think about that. We were 2 blocks off the sheriff's office square, and the first unit on scene was 19 minutes. So it was Officer Marone and I for 19 minutes. If it had just been one of us or one of us was dead, think of the complexities and the problems that could have presented itself on there. So we were very, very lucky given the circumstances. I was very lucky given the circumstances that worse mistakes didn't, or those mistakes didn't result in worse consequences. Ultimately, guys, just be ready. We all know this for the criminal justice system. Sometimes the result is not what you want. He was facing 140 years in state prison and he was pled down to 35. I'm still, I would be lying to you if I said that I wasn't bitter about that, but it is what it is. You have to accept it for what it is.
6 blocks over.
For me, I can remain bitter, I can remain angry about it, or I can take some value from it. I can take some lessons from it. What are those lessons? Officer Marlin was running no weapon light on his duty gun. He was very old school. He ran a snap and rock holster and was running non-dominant hand with the flashlight, dominant hand with the gun light. One of the first things I noticed about Toby, Officer Marlin, when I came back to work, was that he was running an ALS holster with a gun with a weapon light. And I would imagine and I would hope that it was along the same line of thinking that I am. When you run a weapon light on your firearm, there's significant benefits to that. One of the things, it frees up your non-dominant hand. God forbid I had been shot that night and Officer Marlin had to grab me while I'm down on the ground and have to pull me to cover. What does he have to give up at that point? He's got to give up one or the other. He's got to give up his gun or he's got to give up his artificial light, his ability to suppress that target with some light. So weapon lights can present a benefit. In addition, you're adding several ounces on the end of the gun. By adding several ounces of weight on the end of the gun, you're going to reduce overall felt recoil. You're going to control muzzle flip. So I think Webster, it's all 9mm now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when you had like,
It's required.
yeah, back in the day, Springfield used to be like 40 cal when I worked late 90s and you guys were 40. If you get some folks that are smaller stature, smaller hands, that 40 cal is going to have some pop to it. 45 will have pop to it with some agencies. So having a little additional weight on there helps with recoil management and mitigation. This is just a little takeaway from that. On top of that, painting. You know this from APT. You probably heard this term.
I don't know anything about Bob Ross from APT.
Okay, so happy trees, right? Happy targets, happy little targets. So what is painting? What is the concept of painting? Painting is the idea of, imagine if you have to shoot at a moving target. When I shoot at a moving target, am I going to shoot like this? Or ideally, am I going to track nice and smooth? Like a painter's brush. If I'm going through and I'm painting, am I going to do this? Or am I going to be nice and smooth with that brush so it's a nice even coat? That's what you want to do when you're having to deal with a moving target, is ideally you want to develop what we call painting, which is that nice, easy, smooth transition. What does painting look like?
You want to film this one? Yes, sir. And in 108-degree heat, I believe it was, down in Mississippi in front of a very supportive audience, he did it. I mean, he did 8
Jerry
rounds
Mitchell, like
in 1
probably one of the
second
greatest
on
revolver
one
shooters
target.
of all time.
Get ready. Stand by.
He did 8 rounds.
Watch as
on
he
4 targets
transitions
at
between these 4
1.06.
Notice how smooth that transition was?
And
That's painting. That's moving from target to target. Do you need a multi-$1,000 system for target movers to move back and forth on your range to be able to practice that?
Yes.
No. You don't. What did Jerry do on that? He had 4 tombstone targets just sitting next to each other, and he was able to go through and transition between those targets nice and smooth. Can we train officers? Can we train people to be able to do that at a relatively low cost? Because how many times are we going to get into a shooting and the person's going to be like this? They're not going to be standing still the vast majority of the time. I can tell you from both of my shootings, I shot at one that was running out and then running back, and then the other one was a moving car. People don't stand still and motionless in most shootings. Sometimes they do. I think your guy was relatively motionless in his, right? Because he was on a tree stand.
It
Yeah.
was after I shot him.
So, but that's part of what we end up dealing with. So that's a consideration. Your agency doesn't need to have a never-ending budget, and you don't even need your agency necessarily to sponsor you for it. Is it that hard for you to unload your firearm at home, set up, put the ammunition in another room, set up 3-4 targets on the screen, and then be able to use that as a practice basis for it, right? Trigger reset, trigger control, these sort of things. Because-
Still,
Hmm?
you're never gonna master that until you can shoot without anticipating the recoil.
Absolutely,
And that's
absolutely.
still 95% of all troubles.
Yeah,
is people can't shoot without anticipating the recoil.
100%.
You'll never be able to paint, you'll never be able to hit multi-target, you'll never be able to do anything until you can shoot without anticipating the recoil.
and that's the thing, if you don't have the skill set, that foundation built up around that, you're gonna falter, everything else is gonna falter. You have to have a good solid foundation to start building on these skills. The thing that I found out was how critical it is. We focus too much, and Webster has a phenomenal qualification in my opinion, because it does require movement and different distances and these sort of things. A lot of agencies focus so much on stationary shooting and stationary targets and don't force the shooter to actually transition and never get really exposed to that. And the first time they do get exposed to that is when somebody else is trying to kill them. That's not a good circumstance or situation. Another takeaway from this shooting that I want to get into. Sergeant Marcus Young. Anybody familiar with him? Anybody ever heard his story? Sergeant Marcus Young was a sergeant with the Ukiah Police Department. I think he's received an award from the IACP from the Survivors Award. That fine gentleman on the right with the devil horns tattooed to his forehead is the guy who tried to kill Sergeant Marcus Young. Have purpose with your commands, with the verbal commands that you give to people. When I say sheriff's office, show me your hands, what does that mean? Do I really want them to show me their hands? Because what they might have in their hands is a real bad idea, as Sergeant Young found out. Sergeant Young was working a shoplifting, had a female in custody. This is the female's boyfriend. Sergeant Young is walking out, he's got a police explorer with him, and as the police explorer is staying alongside him, there's also an LP, Walmart LP officer with him, and they're going out to the car because she's getting ready to go to jail and he's going to give him the report number, right? Well, as he goes out, this fine gentleman, this fine citizen, decides he's going to go ahead and approach Sergeant Young. As he approached Sergeant Young, he got his hands in his jacket pockets. What does Sergeant Young say? Hey man, I don't know you, show me your hands. He does. Pulls out a 38 special 5-shot J-frame, shoots Sergeant Young 5 times before he can even react. He did exactly what Sergeant Young ordered him to do. Right? Then he pulls out a knife and he proceeds to slash Sergeant Young. He stabs the LP officer. Both of Sergeant Young's hands are disabled enough that he can't draw his firearm out. The police explorer starts to tend to Sergeant Young, while Shithead tries to get in Sergeant Young's patrol vehicle and access an HKG-33 fully automatic rifle. The police explorer manages to get Sergeant Young's gun out of his holster, put it into Sergeant Young's hands, for a 96-40 cal. Sergeant Young fires 1 round into the car door. Guy looks up at him like, wow, that cop's still alive, I can't believe that. Goes back to work. Before he can turn away, Sergeant Young fires a 2nd round and hits homeboy right here. This is where smack dab in the middle of his forehead. The round careens off of his forehead and just knocks him silly for a second before he goes back to work trying to find the release switch for this rifle. Sergeant Young gets back up, walks over, and proceeds to fire the final round, the coup de grace, right at this dude's poop chute. Goes through his butthole, goes up, hits him in the heart. Guy's DRT drops dead right there. I look at this, Sergeant Young, I have to commend him for his survivorship. I mean, this guy went through absolute hell. He shot multiple times, he stabbed, he slashed, and he's still continuing that fight. The bullets that he has in his gun, a 40 caliber, bounces off this dude's head, and the one round that you would think wouldn't kill somebody is the one that actually kills him, getting shot in the ass. But let's look at some of the things that he did during that, and let's tie that into what I did. I said, sheriff's office, if you're inside, make yourself known. That was my command. Did Danny Hand do anything that I didn't tell him to do? He made himself known, right? He made his presence known. When we give those commands, make sure that we're in a good position, and we also understand that compliance with those commands, in their mind, they're complying with it, but it may not be the result that we necessarily want, right? Be specific with some of your commands. It sounds silly, but we sometimes, we say those commands, right? Show me your hands. Show me your hands, but are we in a
It
position?
doesn't say, show me your hands, mean shoot me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, by no means. It doesn't mean that. There's no legal ramifications to it, there's no policy ramifications to it. But when you say those sort of things, say, show me your hands, understand that when they show you their hands, they may very well have something in those hands that you don't want. So, what does that mean? Do I need to adjust my commands? Do I need to adjust my location, my cover? Make sure that you're using those things to your advantage when you start giving verbal commands. Don't make the mistake that I did. Don't make the mistake that Sergeant Young did and be like, hey, show me your hands, and we're contact distance, fully exposed. My threats aren't stacked. I don't have any way. I haven't made that adjustment yet
I don't
necessarily.
think it would have mattered what he
Well,
said. That guy
yes,
had
what would you have
intent,
them do?
and he
Huh?
knew.
Well, what would you have the officer do?
Well,
Get on the ground.
one thing, I mean, I don't think he was prepared, and Sergeant Young talks about this in his debrief. He says, I wasn't prepared for when I said, show me your hands, that he was gonna come out with a handgun. Yeah, normally when you say, show me your hands, it's you're expecting empty hands, right? I wasn't, so the first thing I
You
think
have
of
to
is,
give commands based on statistical probabilities.
correct, absolutely, yeah. But give them, be clear about your commands. Another thing is too, is, I think he talked about as well, is movement, where this guy's approaching me, what was he doing for his actions? Was he going for his gun? He goes, I hadn't addressed the issue with going to my gun because I'm trying to control a shoplifter. This guy's potentially a threat. Yes, the arrestee is your responsibility, but also it's not outside of the realm for you to understand that if this guy is coming to attack you, it may very well be because you've got his girlfriend there. So understand stacking your threats, understand using elements of cover, and recognizing those things further out. This isn't me slamming Sergeant Young saying that if he just done this, he would have had, this is not instant success, not guaranteed success. It's consideration that you say certain things, we do certain things, we have to be very prepared for what the response to that can be. If we think, when we say, show me your hands, make yourself known, and what do we expect everybody to do? Show me your hands. If we're not mentally preparing for ourselves for an adverse result, if we have not taken certain tactics like using cover, having our gun already out to be able to potentially address that, you're putting yourself further behind the curve. You're not ready for it. All right, we'll take another break.